just be correcting us continuously the entire presentation. So um, thanks everyone for being here today. We are really excited to do this presentation today. For those of you who've been on some of our presentations around the education to workforce dashboard that we built this last year, we're trying to go a bit beyond that today to go deeper into our pathway development design, and we're going to share some case studies with you as well. So we're very, very excited. Who has control of the deck? Is that Blair? Is that you?
Yep.
All right. Just a brief bit about us. So I am the Director of Post-Secondary Education and Workforce Development at Wested. That is as scary and weird as it sounds. But I want to tell you a little bit about the team that Kathy Booth and I kind of lead, and the content area that we lead around post-secondary education and workforce. Our real focus is on strengthening the role of higher education, workforce, and economic development programs to improve student access and outcomes in higher education and increase economic mobility for low-income families and communities. We're really see ourselves as being the people focused on living wage jobs and pathways from wherever you're starting, whether that be in high school or the community or in adult education, to being able to leverage different educational systems in ways that allow you to make that journey to success and to achieving the American dream, as unclear as what that is sometimes these days. Blair? This is just some of our lines of work. I'm not going to go very deeply into this. Many of you know that the team that I supervise also does the adult education pipeline dashboard. But in addition to that, so in addition to data tools and analysis and research, we do a lot of work around pathway development and planning that people may not know about. So we'll talk about some pathway exploration and development projects that we're actually doing in the field for adult educators right now. To help you understand some of the broader context of the work beyond the launch board and the adult ed to workforce data tool. We do a lot of work around guided pathways in the community college system and how that touches adult ed and K-12 education and systems that increase student equity and outcomes. We do a lot of labor market and economic analysis, but our real kind of bread and butter, we like to believe, is professional development. And for us, the data tools are only a means for us to kind of focus on having conversations with practitioners, to being able to go meet with a consortium like we've done recently with North Alameda, or with an entire region like we did in the South Central Coast, to take the tools that we're developing and to help practitioners think about ways to use those to strengthen outcomes and pathways for their students. This is our team here today. Veronica already introduced us, but this slide will also be at the end of the deck, and this deck will go out to everybody. So we encourage you to reach out to us. This includes our titles as well as our email addresses. So please feel free to reach out. There used to be like one person on this slide 2 years ago, and that was kind of me. And so it's really exciting to actually see 4 faces up there as the work rolls forward. So we're going to talk about a couple things today. We're going to talk about why career pathways matter. And that's just a couple slides up front to really talk about why this work is so important for our students, and to really kind of introduce a framing concept about what a pathway system is, very, very briefly, that Blair will reinforce later on. Allie will talk some about the education to workforce data tool, and how that can inform the work of consortia and entire regions to really make decisions about how you connect adult education, CTE and workforce preparation programs to community college credit pathways, and to living wage jobs in whatever region of the state that you're working in. Blair will do, she will talk about understanding career pathways and in particular kind of career pathway design thinking. So how can you think about creating a process with your consortia to be able to explore how you can build stronger pathways, what it means to build a pathway system as opposed to an individual training program. Blair has deep roots in this. She has been working on a national contract with Octay to inform the IET toolkit that is currently in development but has yet to be released. So she has a lot of experience in this area, and she's excited to share what she knows about it. Part of that will also be using LMI and employer engagement to build stronger pathways. So we'll touch on that as a part of this career pathway design thinking process. So when we talk about career pathways, and I am painfully aware that when I sit in a, if I sit in a room with 18 people and I use the word pathway or I use the word mapping, that there may often be, 18 different things going on in people's heads. When we talk about a career pathway, we're really trying to think about not just a training program, but a pathway system. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to build a way for someone wherever they're starting, whether it's that extreme entry level job or whether they're coming out of high school or they're coming out of the military, for them to identify a way to get on a pathway that allows them to get that first that first educational experiences that gets them to the better job, but also helps them understand the next stage and what they can do. So what you want your adult learners to do, and I used to say this around the idea of transition in the Adult Ed Consortium, my own consortium in Contra Costa, that if you're not helping students think about transition to the next stage, even in that entry level ESL class or that entry level training program, you're not helping them understand what their pathway could be. But it's this idea that you have multiple entry and exit points for entry level, middle skill, and higher skilled workers. It's aligned both to immediate employment, that there's a job, because most adult learners, if they come to you for a CTE program, they need to get a job and they need to get it relatively quickly. Not everyone is in a position to spend a year kind of training to get to that first job. But it also has a bridge to the next level of training. So I used to say I can get anyone to come and sit down and dig in for 18 weeks to actually finish that first training program, and then they go out into the universe and never see them again. We want them to be able to go to work, but we also want them to be able to know they can come back if they do another term or another training program. They can go from $15 an hour to $20 an hour, which in the context for adult learners and adult education is just a really important wage gain. It's the difference between being food insecure. Oftentimes, a better job means access to health care and other kinds of benefits. It also means improved outcomes for children in some of those same households. So helping people think about the whole pathway and then thinking about transition strategies. So it's not just enough to say, oh, here are all our programs. These things actually kind of line up into some kind of pathway system. But then how do we help them get there? What's the transition strategy? Are you doing kind of exit advising and exit counseling when they leave, in addition to whatever counseling you do when they come in? Do you have ways to help them do an educational plan that actually charts out multiple steps? Do you have transition specialists reaching back out to them after they've been gone a while to see if they're ready to come back to do the next thing? And what you're trying to do at the end of the day is really strengthen student capacity for lifelong learning and setting future goals. I was on a call yesterday and I said, what I really feel like what we're trying to do most of the time is help someone understand and think themselves forward into that next space. Because so many of our students don't see themselves as being educationally proficient. They may not think they're college material if they're starting in the adult school. So how do you help them visualize themselves in that next space or in that future space where they could really be making a living wage and buying a home and really providing for their children in the way that they actually wish they can? Blair? We're going to talk about a couple case studies. We're very, very excited about. These are pretty large scale projects. One of which is we're doing some work in San Diego and Imperial County with the adult schools in the super region down there and the respective college non-credit programs. They want to create a regional career navigation system for adult learners using all of the training programs they collectively offer and to build some kind of online navigation tool for adult learners to understand where the programs are, how the programs connect together into pathways, and what that actually looks like in some sort of online place where adult learners can get better information. Understanding that different schools have different expertise in certain kinds of programs, and if adult learner can actually see the entire picture, it may allow them to think about their opportunities in kind of a larger or grander way. And then secondly is a project that's actually Delta Sierra. I mistyped that. We've been asked to help stand up a sector project focused on transportation, distribution, logistics, and advanced manufacturing for the Delta Sierra Adult Education Consortium. There we go.
No, I shouldn't drive.
So we're pulling labor market information. We're actually doing direct employer engagement with 40 employers and really mapping skills and competencies aligned to entry level, middle skill, and advanced skill occupations in both of these these industry clusters, the goal is to identify pathway opportunities that not only move vertically within each industry, but where there may be translatable skills that allow someone who starts, say, in a warehousing job for Amazon in that county to be able to move over into an advanced manufacturing pathway or vice versa. So we're using skills to inform a broader regional mapping process. And then we're leading pathway design workshops with faculty and the workforce system to develop a sector approach to how they can actually build a much more highly effective and integrated pathway system that can help adult learners move from entry-level work all the way to middle skill jobs. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
Randy, we have a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Frank asks if the team in San Diego has seen the tool Career Coach from the folks at MZ or Skills Match, the other MZ product.
So the market for a career coach, Frank, and I'm sure you're pretty well aware of this, has primarily been colleges. And a lot of it's based around demand, supply data that for programs offered by colleges. Adult school programs are not typically represented in that space. So I will say that the work we're doing in San Diego is as much focused on helping adult educators understand how to organize their courses and their programs, and to understand them as programs of studies that can be organized in a way that can inform something like Career Coach. But I will say the other platform they're looking at and thinking about, there's a tool developed by in Orange County called Program Finder that's doing something like this related to K-12 pathways and the connection to community college. But they haven't really sort of settled on the platform. What we're doing is helping them understand how to organize their programs and their offerings, and what counts as sort of a post-secondary credential or program of study and what doesn't, so they actually know how to populate the data set. So that is my piece of this. I'm going to pass this now over to Ali Balela. Ali is so embedded in this education to workforce data tool that we've wanted to call it the Balela tool occasionally, and just to market it that way. So Ali, why don't you go ahead and take us forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. I'm excited to share this work with y'all. It's been a year and a half in the making, and we're starting to dig into kind of the deeper work in the case studies. So I'm excited to share, the origination of all this work and the data work we've done. Next slide. So the purpose of the project has really been to understand the continuum of CTE and career courses offered both by non-credit and adult education practitioners across the state of California, as we don't have a common data set for course types and descriptions and a classification system for how they all fit together. A second purpose was to map the relationship between adult ed CTE programs and career offerings, the standard occupational codes and credit programs, and into the regional labor market. The third one is really to support consortia pathway development and conversations using labor market data and other resources for CAP students. So out of the data work that we've done, we created a data set that is publicly available for you all, and it also informs the data tool we have, which I hope will help your pathway conversations, and it's also informing how we're moving forward into the deeper work of professional development in different regions, which you'll hear about in the case studies. Next slide. So really the big picture project goal has been to map K-12 college offerings and demand for employment into the labor market in this kind of pathway idea, and to really map out the curriculum and bring adult education into that mapping process. So this is an example of one of the OG maps, the original maps of planning a pathway and thinking about how a student could transition from adult schools into the community college. Next slide. And this is an example that has brought in kind of those industry recognized certifications along with jobs and wages at different levels of the career pathway. So at a very detailed, nuanced level, it gets complicated, but this is helpful information to have. And a lot of our project has been thinking about how to clearly communicate pathway data at a high level, but also make sure that we can drill down and get to this detailed level of information so we can actually help build pathways, but also look at things at a very high level, regional level, and strategically across the state. Next slide. So we did data collection for about 4 months, about 4 months, and we scanned 521 institutions across the state of California, and we found 225 agencies providing CTE workforce preparation courses. And that included over 7,000 course offerings of career technical education in adult schools and non-credit. Next slide. So from that, we created a kind of classification system for having some common terminology and understanding of different levels of the types of CTE courses that are offered in adult schools. So the first being workforce preparation, which is just general workforce readiness, OSHA certifications, general skills necessary for success in the workforce. The next one is the occupational skills builder level, which is offerings that advance skills related to a specific industry, but that in and of themselves wouldn't allow an individual to get a specific job. But they can be really important specific skills for helping advance someone in their current career path or to help someone pivot into a new career path. And these are really important courses to help upskill individuals really quickly. The last one is the occupational credential programs or training programs. These are programs / courses that are sufficient in duration and intensity and provide skills for an individual to enter a specific occupation in a specific industry usually. Next slide. So this is kind of an example of how we think about it in a kind of construction pathway. We have the OSHA 10 kind of workforce preparation that someone already in the field may just need to get, someone who may just be interested could get. Then we have the blueprint reading, which is a specific skill within construction that would be helpful for an individual, but wouldn't allow you to get a full construction job in and of itself. And then we have a construction training program that's really has all of the skills bundled together and packaged in a way that would allow someone to hopefully immediately get a job right after the program, but enter into a specific occupation related to that training program. One of the things we did as we started to map all of the more specific occupational training programs and some of the skills builders as well, to map them to standard occupational codes and to aggregate them at this high level of clusters, is we realized that there were a lot of training programs that had really important skills across the 23 distinct standard occupational clusters. So we further aggregated them into kind of general meta cluster areas. A great example of this is business. A lot of business pathways are a bit amorphous. Students can kind of move around, and there are a lot of common skills across occupations. So that's another really great example. And we found that this has been helpful for us to think about how pathways connect to each other and connect to regional labor markets and help move away from a linear idea of a pathway and really think about the many-to-many connections of how a student could move through their career and education. Next slide. And these are all of the kind of meta clusters, as occupational meta clusters, as we call them, and their ONET 2-digit SOC cluster groupings, essentially. So we tried to group things in a way where there would be a common set of foundational skills that would be important, even within kind of the skills builder courses. And that's what really helped us cluster in this larger way. And that's helped inform the data tool that we have. So you'll be able to search that data tool by these meta clusters and really look at a higher range of occupations related to the training programs. And yeah, next slide. So just a little bit of overview from the data set is that we found the overwhelming majority of CTE courses are those occupational skills builder courses. It's really only in the health and construction repair services sector where the occupational training courses get close. to matching the amount of offerings in occupational skills builder courses. And this chart is for across the entire state of California. We also found that the majority of workforce preparation courses fell into kind of Microsoft applications, basic computer skills, and then general workforce readiness courses. Some higher level findings that we gleaned from doing this data work and scanning through all of the course catalogs and websites and brochures is that we found California had a really diverse mix of occupational training courses and skills builder courses, and a diverse mix of occupational sectors. There wasn't really a common trend that one region was offering far more of one sector than another, or that one region or one area was offering a lot more occupational training programs. The kind of mix of sectors and occupational training programs and skills builder courses were the same across the state. Overall, about 60% of courses were those skills builder courses. At least a third of the adult education courses that we found. Sorry, I can't see the screen, the PowerPoint.
While Blair is switching that back, we do have a question. Oh, great. I think Blair's putting that, but we had a question whether this data is available now, Allie, or if it's still in progress, and what years were the data derived from?
Yeah, so we did our data collection. The years are getting wonky now that it's been a year of COVID, but we did the data collection for fall 2019 and spring 2020 in those kind of 4 months over right before and after Christmas. And so we tried to capture what would theoretically be available in about the fall 2019 to about spring 2020. I realized that most adult education courses aren't on a semester system, but we were hoping to capture, fall, spring courses. And so that is currently available. There is a link to the public data set, and it is also the information that informs the data tool.
I will share related to what Allie's saying, that one of the things we're trying to determine this year is based on the additional kinds of work that consortia come to us and say they want to do with the data set on the tool will probably inform the way we support this in future years. We're trying to figure out an appropriate use case for it and the way it supports the right kind of conversations. And the two case studies that we're talking about are just two places where consortia have said, this is exciting, hey, help us get to the next place with it. We are open to continuing to update it, but the data set related to K-12 adult education courses in particular is very difficult to get except manually. And so that's one of the things that is challenging about doing this on a regular basis. So.
Yeah, definitely. And we did find, as we were scanning through all the course catalogs and brochures and websites, is that we found about a third of adult education schools didn't have any CTE or workforce preparation courses listed. And that's not to say that they don't exist at those schools, but we couldn't find any publicly available evidence of it in the time frame that we were searching for courses. From the public information we were able to find, it was also difficult to identify whether or not those schools were offering integrated or IET programs. But we did feel that the emphasis on skills builder courses is strongly aligned with the mission of adult education to get adults upskilled very quickly in areas that are relevant to their needs. So this is kind of the front of the dashboard, and we'll go into a live demo quickly, but we wanted to kind of give an overview of how it's organized. So on the left is all the educational data, and on the right is all of the labor market data. And we designed it in this way to kind of connect the occupational codes to pathways at a high level to start looking at a bigger view of what's available across the state or in a particular region. And it organizes those pathway courses into broader meta clusters. So as we search through, you'll see all of the occupational training courses and credit programs aligned to those occupational meta clusters. So we're really looking at a high level view. And it really distinguishes between courses that build occupational skills and courses/programs that lead to a specific job. Next slide. And then I think click through one more time so they can see, yeah. So as we go through the kind of live demo that we're going to do, I'd like you guys to think about a couple questions. How could you imagine using this information to build or strengthen a career pathway? How could it inform student advising? And what conversations between adult education and college practitioners could you have using this information? And feel free to start typing into the chat and we can have a conversation about what ideas are coming up from the chat after we do the live demo.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so you can take it away.
Okay. Thanks, Blair. All right, can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up. See the dashboard? Awesome. So when you land on this page, the first thing you'll see is this is now a representation of all the education offerings in the state of California and also all of the occupation data in the state of California. So like I said before, all the education data is on the left, all the labor market data is on the right. And as you scroll down, there will also be a list of occupational skills builder courses. So this table will be filtered as you go through and start using the filters at the top to specify a specific occupational area or a specific region. This table will also filter along with all the charts up above. And down below, we have a data update request. So if you have any questions or if you see something that's really off with your specific school, you can contact us through this form that's embedded right into the dashboard. So the first place we'll want to start selecting information is to start looking through a specific meta cluster, let's say IT and engineering. So we can select that specific one. And all of the charts will now be modified or filtered based on that initial filtering. So we're now looking at all of the educational offerings and all of the occupation data related to IT and engineering for the entire state of California. And then we can go in and we can specify a specific region. I'm currently in Oakland, so I'm going to look at the Bay Area, see what's going on there. And so we can see there's a number of, here in the blue, these are the adult education occupational training courses, and there are a number of IT technician, network associate, and web developer. If you click on one of these, so I've clicked on IT technician, we can drill down and look at the schools that are offering that specific occupational training program. And then we can see all the community college non-credit courses. We can click on program and developer and drill down and to see where this non-credit course is being offered at which college. And then we can also drill down and see the number of community college credit awards. So these are just the number of degrees that are offered in this area. And so we can click on architecture and drill down and see the colleges that are offering that specific program. And hopefully this will help start thinking about how a pathway could be built from education, adult education, occupational training courses, all the way through to credit, looking at aligning some of the training programs and degree offerings that exist. Over here on the right, we can start sorting through the occupational data. So for the Bay Area, I want to make sure that all of the occupations being demonstrated meet a self-sufficiency hourly wage, which is from the Insight Center calculator. And that I believe in the Bay Area is $23 an hour. So we can click on that filter. Now we know that everything that's popping up in the occupational data meets at least a self-sufficiency wage. We can also narrow it down a little bit. So the Centers of Excellence has a skill category identification for all their SOC codes. So we could look at only middle skill occupations, which would be mostly aligned to an associate's degree, post-secondary certification level of occupation. So now we can see that within the self-sufficiency hourly wage and kind of at the middle skill level, so requiring about associate's degree or some post-secondary education, computer user support specialists are really at the top here. And then computer occupations all other, and network computer systems administrators. So we can see there's some alignment here with the network associate and network computer systems administrators. So that's really cool to see. Can also go down and then look at all of the specific occupational skills builder courses being offered to support this area in this specific sector. All right. Are there any questions about how the dashboard works or any ideas so far? I just dropped the link to the dashboard in the chat, so you guys will have access to that and can walk through it.
Yeah, I was curious, do any of you see how this might be useful, particularly in informing student advising? And how you might be able to use this? It's a quiet group out there today. In other,
Hi, yes, I'm from Hacienda La Puente Adult Education. My name is Rosie Sandoval. Hello, everyone. Yes, I see it's kind of like a directory. So I could see maybe a student with, if they tell me, oh, I'm interested in taking, licensed vocational nurse. And or if someone at another campus has a student, but they don't have that class, then they could see that we were on their Hacienda La Puente Adult, and then maybe they could assist that student with getting on our interest list or finding out more about our school if they're in this region. Again, because it narrows it down to the region, then maybe that's a good thing. Or if maybe a student is moving from this region to another and wants to either continue their education or look for a different pathway, something like that. But I could see it as a counselor, utilizing this as kind of a directory to advise students, information about courses that we may not have or other schools could refer here, that kind of thing. Thank you.
I can build on that. My name is Amos Nugent. I'll go and turn my camera on. I'm with Pleasanton Adult and Career Education here in the Bay Area as well. And so we're part of the Mid-Alameda County Consortium. And so for our CTE work group, this could definitely be a resourceful tool as we start thinking about trying to just build out and align our pathways regionally. So helping to ensure that it's informed, and with our local community college, this is some of the work that we are already beginning to work on. So I like how this is here and just readily available. So a question that I had is, how does this compare or tie into information that our local workforce development board would have in terms of labor market information, things, so that way we're ensuring that we're using what is recognized as the standard versus a couple different things, because that's kind of a place where we're at in the early planning processes.
So that's just a response to that. We pull from basically the same LMI data tools that most of the workforce boards in California do, all of which is fed by the BLS, the Bureau of kind of Labor Standards. And oftentimes you'll see slight discrepancies, like if someone's using Bernie glass as opposed to MZ, as opposed to directly using BLS or EDD data. But generally, the arc of demand around occupational demand and wages is pretty consistent. So it shouldn't be too far off. And I saw a question in there related to how things are classified and in terms of experience. It is often a little distressing to see the way in which the BLS classifies the education level needed to attain a certain job. For example, the BLS still says that that the police officers only need a high school education and don't need any post-secondary education. And we know that the peace officers all attend basically police academies and training programs that would be considered post-secondary education, whether or not they're actually offered by a college. So the data sets are never perfect, but in terms of a general guide or a place to start, and I like to say that labor market information is the great conversation starter. And a data set like this is the conversation starter for deeper questions about what you want to show your students or how you want to identify shared work across the institutions in your consortium.
So yeah, one of my colleagues had a question. So if this tool is available, would everybody be able to see it? Like if I'm in high school, I'm a high school student, would I be able to have access to this directory, or would it only be the counselors?
No, it's a link that's totally open for anyone. So if you have the link, you can look at it.
Okay, thank you.
I will just also adding on to what Randy said, is that I've looked at some of the MZ data versus Workforce Development Board LMI data, and sometimes they're slightly off. The annual openings might be different by like 5 annual openings, but this is a great tool to start. So if you're looking at this area and you want to look into computer user support specialists or even the IT industry, then you'll have some starting points to go talk to your Workforce Development Board and get some more detailed information about, how that specific occupation might slot into different industries that are active or growing in your area.
Ali, there was one other question. Will the LMI data be available down to the zip code level?
I don't think we pulled it by zip code. I think we pulled it by county.
And Randy further answered that MC can provide the LMI data by zip code. So
that was a loaded question, Randy. We actually have that.
Totally
Of course it was, Randy. You know me too well. But the reason it's a loaded question is in a situation like Tahoe's, where El Dorado County data really skews to the western slope and doesn't give us anything, any of the casino data. We really need that zip code level area. And I'm imagining there are probably some other small rural schools that would need that access as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's challenges in a tool like this in terms of what's the grain size, right? And we could provide this, like the offerings information at the consortia level. Then we would have to map those consortia service areas to the zip codes for the LMI data they have, which is a much more complicated, both programming and kind of mapping effort. Not that we aren't up for that kind of thing, but it would be, this is sort of a prototyping exercise to figure out if we put these data sets in the same place and to have a productive conversation about what would something like this look like.
Yeah. Just one last thing, and then I'll be quiet because I do have to run to the next meeting. So, Randy, you can breathe a nice sigh of relief. No more loaded Frank questions today for you. The idea of filtering by zip code level is really how it works for us, and that, that's one way around having to map it from the beginning.
So if I may, this is Marianne Pranke with the Verdugo Workforce Development Board, and I'm also the adult education coordinator for Glendale. And one of the benefits of integrating the two is that we do have access to the data that is the most current, pulling EDD LMI data. And by the way, the LMI data that you would have available here is very helpful and easy and accessible to get initial information. But if you want any specific information, including information on specifically per zip code or per city, then your workforce board should be able to help you with that. That's where we get our information. we do have access to data that is not available to the general public. It's not available, even though it's EDD data. Some of it is also, we have access to EconoView, which has Dun & Bradstreet data. So we can get very, very specific data customized to what our college needs. So your workforce board should be able to do that for you. Not all workforce boards are created equal. However, most of them do want to be a resource to adult schools and credit, non-credit as well, and be able to provide that information to you. So there is specific information. Right now, some of the most critical information is you can pull data from EDD LMI. Everything looks great because it's all 2019 data when our economy was doing great. That is not reflective of today. Right now, we have the impact of the pandemic and what it's done, how it's affected our businesses and workforce. So that 2019 data may not be all that helpful if you're trying to make decisions on how to address needs and issues right now as a result of the pandemic. And that's where the workforce board can help you.
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle. Like, so in the San Joaquin County project, we'll talk about at the end of the presentation, we're having to look at things like WARN notices to get kind of a better picture of what's happening on the ground with business and industry, just because it provides a picture of where layoffs are occurring that may not be reflected in the actual LMI data sets yet.
Correct, Randy, and the WARN notices are now available on the EDD website as well. However, once again, WARN notices are not required right now. The governor did sign an executive order that waived the WARN notices. So your workforce boards are really going to be able to give you a good idea of what the layoffs are, because they're talking to the businesses that never submitted a WARN notice. So it's going to be whatever the WARN notice is for a particular area, you can probably quadruple that number. And that's probably closer to what it is, and your workforce boards can give you that information.
So just for, so people have this, because this PowerPoint will be distributed. We have this slide where Ali has put the links for both the public data set and the dashboard itself. But I think we're actually going to move it forward into kind of our first case study and then on to kind of the career pathways design process discussion. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So we are doing a project with the San Diego Imperial County, which is both an economic region in the community college system, and it's a super region in the adult education system in California, where they asked us to help the adult schools and the non-credit programs using the data tool and the underlying data set as a starting place to build a comprehensive really map and listing of CTE training programs in the region offered by adult education, to then secondarily kind of connect that up to community colleges so they want to build their own like career exploration and advising tool for adult learners that would be publicly available online. The tool that Ali showed is not really designed to be, it's publicly available, but not really meant to be a student-facing tool. The idea would to build something that would be highly accessible to adult learners in the region, even folks with relatively low levels of literacy, to understand where they can get education and training leading to better jobs. And Ali, Alex, I think I've got another piece in this slide. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is organize and classify the CTE courses to help them build a career pathway system and a career navigation platform across the SDIC region and kind of super region. Next slide. This sort of shows some visualizations that we help them develop. What we're doing is we're taking the typology of courses in the data tool, which is there's these occupational skills builder courses that do not necessarily lead to a job directly, but help people build skills that are highly relevant to the workforce. And as Ali identified, that's an enormous percentage of the CTE courses offered by adult schools in California, which I think is completely consistent with the mission of adult education as being a place where an adult learner who doesn't have a lot of time, they want to improve their skills to actually kind of continue to move their career forward, and they can go take a course to do that in the same way they would do, like when they would go sit in on an ESL course or in an open entry, open exit ESL course. It's a way of building skills that are really important for the adult learner population in California. However, there also are programs that the adult schools offer, and you see a list of them here in the middle, that are like, certified nursing assistant, dental assistant, EMT, home health aide, where it's a program clearly designed that if you complete this program, it gets you a specific job or occupation in an industry. And we actually use the definition for a post-secondary credential in WIOA and in CAPE to inform this distinction, that there are certain characteristics for these more fully blown out kind of training programs. It's more instructional hours. It's really pointing much more towards a specific job than kind of a general set of skills. And we mapped these out and created this distinction so that they can then SOC code those courses. So using standard occupational codes. So you can actually then, using the ONET codes, kind of identify the specific job they're supposed to get, which would also allow you then to connect that to labor market information related to those jobs. The vision of the folks, of the adult educators down there, is they want to start with the job. So they're not thinking about top codes or SIP codes. They're thinking about what's the occupational code for the training programs we have that we could use as part of a data set to inform an online tool to help adult learners identify the jobs they want to get and where the training programs are to actually be able to access those. Next. So the structure and focus, just a little bit, it's a greater San Diego region. So this is like 10 adult schools across 2 counties and 10 community colleges. They will eventually be connected through this online tool. We're not building the tool. What we're doing is we're leading a process to help the adult educators in particular right now organize their courses and identify what their occupational programs of study are, and then to help them build a coding structure. We're actually teaching them how to SOC code their programs, and then having them go and actually meet with their consortia to go through their courses and their programs to actually apply codes to them that will actually inform the tool. And it's a way of putting the power of the data in their own hands, which is really what's most important to us here. We're doing 3 train the trainer. Say hello. Okay, Alex. Now Blair can do that, but you can't. So we're doing 3 train the trainer sessions for consortia reps. So each consortia has identified 1 or 2 folks who are learning all about ONET, about standard occupational codes, about the kinds of definitions that really apply to a post-secondary credential, so that they can actually lead the work on their own consortia. So we're building capacity on the ground for people to be able to do this work once we're no longer in the room. And I should say we're doing this in partnership with another West Ed team who actually is working with the Strong Workforce Consortia down in that region to do a whole bunch of sort of career-related work across that region. But they brought us in specifically because of our expertise in this area. So they have been meeting independently to categorize and SOC code their courses and programs. West Ed people have been sitting in some of those meetings to answer questions. And then eventually we're going to develop and populate a data set so that all of the schools can basically upload their data around their programs into one place, into one database that'll be used to then develop some form of online tool. We will probably not be involved in the online tool development. There are other folks from West Ed who may be, but we're kind of helping them develop the expertise and the capacity. And this is all work inspired by the data tool that Ali created for us to help them actually begin to develop a vision for what they could use that data to help inform. The next steps will be align this with the community college credit pathways, and then explore the development of the online career platform. This is just a timeline of where we're at. We're trying to wrap up the aggregation of the information in March. That may slide into April, but we started this in December, and there was a whole set of preliminary conversations with leadership in the region. We presented to the super region group, that has all the adult schools and the non-credit programs kind of working together. And we've been having these train the trainer events now for a couple months. And so we just have a couple prompt questions here, and you can feel free to reference these in the chat, or if you want to quickly kind of just reflect on them here. Is this the kind of project that you think could benefit your region? We did hear people talking about almost using the data set like an advising structure. And I put a comment in the chat about that, where you could actually say, hey, it would be great if the adult school down the road knew that they have a student who has this kind of interest who could benefit from this kind of program, and that we actually have that program over here. And as much as people work together, they don't always know what each other have to actually support that. And then what kinds of support do you think you would need actually to sort of take on this kind of project? Silence is golden. Okay, so maybe in the interest of time, what we'll do, oh, here we go. Oh, I like the process. Rose says, I like the process of being able to share information. Also, if you have interest in doing something like this in your region, or if you want to explore this more with our team, I would say, please indicate that in the chat. And then we will be printing the chat afterwards and then kind of maybe trying to follow up with people who've indicated that they have a strong interest in doing some additional work with us. We're supporting work across the state right now in a variety of locations, doing things similar to this, or even just having kind of career pathway development and design conversation.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if anybody else is doing something like this and using a different strategy.
Well, here at Hacienda La Puente, the consortium with Mount SAC, our community college, we do have regular meetings, I believe once a month or twice a month with our CTE group and then our high school diploma, high school equivalency academic group. So we do share information that way, but I think that this tool could be helpful, as you say, for the whole region to share maybe with all the schools in this region or programs. So yeah, I see how that could be beneficial. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. Yeah, I think that the nice piece about this is how strategic it is, that you really have to guide conversations and it brings people talking around the same points. All right, let's go ahead. I think we can move on into our career pathway design section. And we can go ahead and move forward, Alex.
This is Amos, and I echo what Rose said as well for our region here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, thanks, Amos. So we're back to the slide that we started with, right? The career pathway system. And I would like to note that this is obviously the ideal for a career pathway, and it identifies some of the core aspects of what a pathway should look like. The San Diego example identifies ways that consortia and institutions can work to delineate some of these well-developed transitions and between courses and next steps that Randy identified up front. And then similarly, the work on the soft codes, the primary, and we also do a secondary one, also helps identify how sort of the entry and exit and transition points can support what we call branching or latticing to a parallel pathway. Because one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about as we go along is that pathway is it's often represented in a singular way. And when we start talking about systems, we want to think about how students and learners enter, exit, transition, and then also maybe transition to a pathway or they lattice over to something that is within the same cluster or occupational family or in a different industry, but has the same transferable skills. We want to highlight that the career pathway needs to align to employment, ongoing opportunities, such as higher skills and employment and training opportunities. And that ultimately the basis of the career pathway is to strengthen the student capacity for lifelong learning and setting and accomplishing future living wage, employment, and life goals. So we can go to the next slide. So this is an example of a pathway where they have identified both prerequisite needs, and then they offer a variety of levels, IETs, supported IETs. And then what they do is that they take the basic administrative prep class and then allow it to branch into other areas of study. So when we're talking about the pathway and the latticing, we're actually using a term that what we have coined as many to many, where there are multiple routes and destinations. You know, connections are based on transferable skills and not a singular skill, that there are clear options for students at each of the stages where they might enter one place and then transition to something different as they explore. If you see in that pink box, it's hard to see, but they actually go through a career exploration and inventory. And so at that point, they may discover that they are on a different pathway, or they have a different interest. And also to point that while these are all based on those administrative skills, they go into IET, they go into the traditional business office basic administrative certification as well. So they don't have to be within the same industry or occupational cluster. So next slide. And this one really brings it in so you can see a little bit more closely the different pieces. So they've even built in like a leadership certificate. There's their basics, office basic administration certification. You've got your Google app development and electronics digital certificate, and then a 3D short term certificates so that the student doesn't get placed into one piece. And the other thing is that you can also, once you complete the certificate, what they haven't identified here is that you can go back in and take some other certificates if it suits your purposes. So again, they start out co-enrolled in a high school equivalency prep course that's contextualized to general administrative office competencies. And then using that many-to-many skills concept, then you can branch up into different areas of concentration. Next, please. And so we talked about as the lattices, and they can be simple or complex. If you, I think already many of you already know about pathway lattices. This is not a new concept. Neither, obviously, I should have started up front. Neither is the career pathway. So, but we identify them here because we want to affirm that the concept that a skill set can translate to many different occupations, and then they should be seen as being able to be leveraged across sectors. And you see in this simple example up at the top, which is the public and protective services and the healthcare, is that it's that has been plotted is just simply the routes that you might go, right? So you can talk to a student and say, hey, if you get the EMS, you can go into these different occupations. If you are a security specialist, you can both go to EMS, or you can go into some of these others. So it's a very simple lattice or map. I would use the term map because you can follow the routes. The other one, the transportation, distribution, and logistics, you can use that similarly. However, there's a great deal more information for working with learners or for thinking about how you would like to lattice them over, where they include the level of training, the different pathway opportunities based on that education and wages. And you can see that it also includes the transitions up the ladder, right? So it's not a simple flat piece here. It takes the learner and then also identifies where they go again. And so indicating a true pathway on how this is.
I would actually add, Blair, that these are not student-facing kind of visualizations, right? So these are program maps that I did like practically 15 years ago now in other projects, but they were used to help a set of practitioners and systems come together around what the opportunities were, and building out the connections in ways that allowed them to have a deeper conversation about what they needed to build in the context of their own work with students.
So yeah, you can use them for program building as well to identify those pathways. And I've also developed, similar ones that can be used student facing. So as you develop these out and you're thinking it's a lot of work to, particularly for the more detailed ones, is that how to multi-purpose those. And the next stage. So here's really the crux of what we're getting at, those are some examples to propel you into sort of the pathway design thinking. And we've got the 5 steps here. And this is a basic process that you can use to develop your own thinking about the pathway. What we really want to draw in are the key decision points as you go through and develop your pathway, because the pathway has to be a continuum. It's not just a program. As Randy said, I have a lot of experience developing the IET program, which is a portion of the pathway. However, you oftentimes see the IET built as the pathway, whereas we want you to think more broadly that those entry and exit points. We were recently in a workshop and someone talked about the career pathway system as a subway map, visualizing it that way, where people get on in one station, they go to, you know, a particular point, and then they can transition over and back on. And I think Frank brought that piece up, that having that really articulated piece of thinking about a pathway as where people enter, they should be able to enter at different points and be able to exit and then come back onto that pathway. And this will, if you use sort of these steps to inform your design thinking, then you can really pull them through and have a clear pathway that people can respond to. And one of the things that we'd really like to do is identifying your pathway or program it is not an isolated experience, right? You really need to think about who your population is going to be, what is the industry you're going to use, and what are the occupations that you're going to target. In this, we talked a little bit about the LMI data, that this is really an appropriate place to bring that in, to prompt your thinking. I think Randy was saying, you know, it's a place to start asking questions, to answer some of those questions. And then really thinking about who you want to create a pathway for, you know, who are the most likely people who are going to work through it. I've seen people build pathways and programs and they haven't taken off because they forget to identify who are their target learners and will the pathway appeal to them. You can build a really great pathway, but you need the students who are interested in that training in the target occupation. So really think about all three of those pieces. Setting up your pathway and developing your aligned pathway programs are really about planning and the development of that pathway once you've identified those key pieces that will inform the pathway. And you're identifying how the participants will travel on the pathway, who provides the support to ensure your participants can enter and exit the pathway. And then thinking about the clearly building that map with your partners. And I'd like to just say that, like, the workforce board are really good partners in these. Your workforce partners at One Stops, they will really help support processes. They can inform different ideas about what skills are needed. So engaging employers are really important to your pathway. If it doesn't have some kind of employment options or people who can review your curriculum or the steps in the process, where the different jobs might be placed, is extremely valuable. So again, when I talk about people being able to have a collaborative, that's what you really need in order to set up a clear pathway. We'll have a case study that really will bring this home. And then step 4, which is develop the continuous improvement plan. It is a piece that is often overlooked in the building of the pathway, not so much in the program. So many of us are really accustomed to doing continuous improvement in order to understand what our program outcomes, whether they're being met, whether we're engaging people. However, the same principle you want to think about, you want to add that into your pathway design thinking, right? You want to identify your goals and your outcomes. And this might initially be something like engaging key stakeholders, identifying programming, or establishing strong facilitated transition points, and then building in ways to get at that information, like finding out where are your students and your learners going? Are they exiting? Are they re-entering? You could revisit your LMI data to identify if you're still on target with forecasting. Do you want to keep that pathway? Do you want to tweak it a little bit? And also, are employers hiring your students and your participants? Are you getting those outcomes as well? So these are just ways to think about that whole pathway design thinking. And then when you have those first 4 pieces in place, then you're ready to implement your pathway plan, which would be pushing it out with your partners and your collaborators, and implementing also the improvement plan that you've identified. So just quickly, I know that we're going through this very, very quickly. The program we do on IET program development is about 50 hours of training. So this is a really condensed version. And I'm just going to reiterate your career pathway must-haves. We talked about labor market and the employer needs. You really want to bring them in. Because if your labor market is off, then you might not, or your employers don't align with the particular labor market that you're looking at. Then again, that key point of getting participants into jobs will not be there. And it's engaging your relevant partner. And you really want to prepare your learners for specific occupations or an occupational cluster. They have to be an explicit pathway with multiple entry, transition, and exit points. And really what you want to do is think about how you're accelerating education and training and building on those opportunities, which bridge to employment and additional training and educational opportunities. Once you get to one point and they get a job, some participants, that will be the place where they stop out. Others will want to look and get back on to the pathway. And those transition points and how they do that are really important. And partners are a great way to build sort of those guiding, the warm handoffs, as we call them, where they can still stay within an informed pathway where people can guide them back onto that pathway and into training and opportunities or onto additional employment opportunities. And always remembering that the relevant credentials and certification opportunities are important because they offer the participants something to take with them and pieces that might be required. So that was like your fastest overview of the career pathway. And I'm just curious, when you're looking at this list of must-haves, are there others that are needed for building a robust career pathway? I'm sure some of you have already been involved in this. We've helped some of you think through the process. Just curious if you found other things that really should be included.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, thanks, Ryan.
Okay. Hi, I think it's fabulous work. And I would say that prior to the pandemic in our consortium, the MountSAC Consortium for Adult Ed in LA County, we had basically compiled all of our CTE programs across our consortium and aligned them with the college's career pathway. And, you know, it just kind of fell to the side like after the pandemic hit, but we had started doing it internally. And I do want to say I'm loving this. Randy, I got to tell you, I loved your first 5-minute intro. I was just nodding my head at everything you were saying. It just kind of framed the work that's here and how this relates to serving our students. When I look at this list and I think about my schools, I have some that are highly staffed. I mean, just fully staffed, I should say. And then I have some that have what I would call like skeletal staffing. And the things that come to my mind are the ability to actually get this information to students. You know, does a school have a counselor or a career advisor, kind of like at a high school level? And if they don't, you know, can this tool exist in this virtual way where maybe there's a poster up in an office and a student can scan a QR code to kind of look at pathways themselves. And I love the last set of charts that you went over, Blair, where it just seemed like, can we roll this out to instructors of every level? And, you know, my vision is to see pathways like, I think Randy kind of said it, like when a student walks in, even if it's a literacy ESL student, and we immediately intake them to start thinking about, you know, what is your end game? What's your end goal? Here are the career paths that can come from your educational journey. So whether it's you come in to learn English, but I believe that, you know, our goals are economic development, workforce development. That's the end game for us. Transitions to higher education, you know, at least out of the adult school side, although CTE is post-secondary. But anyway, yeah, I was looking at it thinking like when Randy had said earlier, what do you need? Is you don't that's not here. Staffing, either staffing or some place that this functions in a virtual space where we can refer students almost down to an app, you know, where at a self-guided level, they can see it at a basic basic information, and as their literacy progresses, that they can use the tool in a broader standpoint, and that instructors in any setting, and I really think in academic setting, can use this as a teaching tool, you know, to integrate, create lessons around it. So I know you mentioned IET, and I think that a lot of programs really just really took a hit from the pandemic. So where we were all on track, just like, you know, unemployment in LA was like 4%, and now it's like 10.5%, even though it was 20 after the pandemic. But you know, those are some things that I think about. I just think about the staff able to access this, to understand it across consortiums or regions, and even down to the micro level of the classroom, because most of the time, I believe our instructors are ad hoc counselors for our students. You know,
Absolutely.
you have so many adult schools that are almost bare bones, and they don't have these layers of infrastructure in educational environments. So it has to be something that even a teacher could use and help support a student. So those are my thoughts.
Those are great thoughts, Ryan. I think that I love the QR code. And yes, that's exactly, I mean, I think part of the purpose of the San Diego project is to end up having a tool like that people can use. And I'm a real soapbox issue of you know, what Randy's talking about, where you come in and you embed that career counseling, the information about really explicit transitions, and helping learners embed that in sort of their mindset about what does this look like and where am I going to. And you know, and staffing is always an issue. And you know, we talk about taking, you know, small bites at the issue where you build those pieces. And I would say that some people really effectively use their partners to do that, where they bring in the employers, and the American Job Centers have done some really good work by collaborating, and then seeing how you can, you know, draw on counselors at different levels. But I think that is a core piece to really doing a strong pathway. And I think it's one of the harder pieces, because you are moving across these pieces. So thanks. I think that's an excellent point. So thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to say, before I turn my camera off, I always scroll lists of who's on CASE meetings, and I'm very happy to see a number of staff members from across my consortium who are on this meeting today. So I see leaders, I see instructors, you know, so that they're all catching the same message. So when I come back to, I see give me that thumbs up, thank you. So when we talk about these things, like in our CT work group or our counselors work group, 3 sites that have and Hacienda La Puente also has the EDD co-located at their main site as well. And it's just a powerful piece, and really working with our workforce development board, and in LA County, it's Workforce Development Community Aging Services that the board falls under. And we're really building partnership with them to create some great efforts moving forward. So everything you guys are doing is just dead on target. I wanted to get to the masses like a Gutenberg Bible. So
well, thank you, and congrats for everyone for showing up. And I appreciate you sharing. I'm going to move along. I'm going to go over the next couple of slides really quickly, because I want to get to the case study that sort of makes this concrete. We really want to show how these things that we're talking about move in and what they look like on the ground. And so we're just making a shout out for, we've talked a lot about labor market and occupational data and the important questions. Take a look at these when you download the PowerPoint, because they are really a good place to start asking questions and being able to think about transferable skills and how you want to align with your region's priorities and ensure that they're concrete job opportunities for learners. And there are a couple links here at the bottom that offer some really explicit, deep information that we're not going to go into. Next slide, please. One of my favorite pieces, because it's both practitioner and student friendly, is ONET. I would imagine that many of you are familiar with it, but it offers most of the information you'll need, including, I'm going to hit on it again, those transferable skills, focus on family, job families, and the job zone, which can help establish how jobs can stack from those that require less to more experience and preparation. Next slide, please. And these are your additional resources. Take a look at them when you come back and visit the PowerPoint. And I think I'm going to transition over to Randy, who's going to talk about one of our projects. Can we move forward? Thank you.
Oops. Hello, are you waiting for me?
Yes.
My apologies. I'm actually double booked into a California Student Aid Commission meeting, so I am ping-ponging a little bit. I apologize. So this is another project that we are just starting. It is a project with the Delta Sierra Adult Education Alliance, which is basically Stockton, San Joaquin County. Delta College is the college there, and there's 4 or 5 adult schools who are doing some really nice work in that area. And they've been doing work about standing up a series of what they're calling sector partnerships, really kind of sector-focused training strategies that leverage the assets of the community college and the adult schools in that county. And this is one specifically focused on transportation, distribution, logistics, TDL. You'll see that show up a lot, and advanced manufacturing, AM, pathways. Although it's more broadly, it's manufacturing pathways, because the notion of advanced manufacturing is a fairly fuzzy distinction between different types of production activity that actually happen in an economy. But the mission is to complete a real to create a really employer kind of educator partnership to help create a qualified workforce for employers in the North San Joaquin Valley, Stockton, San Joaquin Valley specifically, but the surrounding areas as well, because Stockton sits in a broader kind of economic landscape that includes Stanislaus County, all the way down to Merced, and actually overlaps into the East Bay as well. And then secondarily, to really kind of identify within these industries pathways to family sustaining careers for area residents. And we're not using specifically the tool that Allie's developed for this work, but we are using a methodology that goes deeper in each area that the tool covers to help inform this work. So the 3 goals is we're mapping the TDL and AM industries and the skills needed for entry level and middle skill employment, both in the specific county and the surrounding region, to really inform whether our understanding of whether or not the adult ed and community college programs, the middle bubble here, are aligned with the industry needs. And so if we identify a set of entry level kind of opportunities and we don't have training programs aligned to them, and there's a gap there, that gives us a way to focus in on building something new. Or similar there, if there isn't a bridge to kind of the next level certificate, maybe at the community college, that also identifies kind of something new that we could create and build. And then the other thing we're doing, and actually this is work that, well, first of all, Allie, who's on this call, is pulling the labor market information for this. And then Blair and Alexandra, who are also here today, are actually leading the pathway development work, the initial work with adult school faculty, community college faculty, and representatives from the workforce development boards. And they're going to be doing similar, more in-depth trainings like this today to really explore what does it mean to build a pathway? What does that mean in the context of what adult educators think of, as opposed to college educators, as opposed to workforce board people, to have them over a series of trainings. We're doing 3 kind of 2-hour training blocks to have them identify a design team for a project in common they would want to build. Because what we don't want to do is pull a bunch of data and say, here's your data, go build something. We want to get them teed up to the point where they have a shared framework and concepts to inform a design process to agree to build something. And whatever they build, they would actually kind of dig in and do the pathway design development work in fall to actually do a prototype training in the spring of next year. Sorry. Next. This kind of shows just the breadth of it, that it really is county-wide. It includes a whole range of kind of partners. I'm not going to go deep in sort of who's at the table because we're running out of time, but if you're thinking about building this kind of more ambitious kind of sector initiative, it's important to identify who are the relevant stakeholders. Blair talked about that, identifying your partners. In this case, they're going very broad. So we're talking to a lot of economic development intermediaries, as well as the educators. And then we're pulling in more and more employers as well as the project moves forward. This just shows the components of the project. We're pulling labor market data. We're going to interview 40 employers in the county, and we're going to target small, medium-sized, and large employers. We're going to target employers from a variety of subsectors within TDL or advanced manufacturing. And we're trying to learn two things from the employers. So we're going to look at the skills related to occupations in the occupational data, but then we're going to interview both the HR people who supervise the hiring process and shop floor managers to understand two things. What really is a highly desirable candidate for this job? And then how would you describe a high performing person in the shop floor? Oftentimes you talk to HR and sort of shop floor managers, they have different things to say about the ideal person for them. And we're trying to use that to augment the labor market data and the occupational data we're collecting. And once we've done all that demand side work, we're going to map that against the pathway system. We're going to have this pathway building component, and then we're going to focus on building a regional sector or supporting of the consortia to help develop a regional sector partnership versus the table, educators, employers, economic folks, and other stakeholders focused on how you pathways in these industries. And this is the last slide. And so this is kind of their broad to create a shared table for industry, education, and government to kind of innovate and collaborate, really aligning kind of workforce education and economic strategies around the specific sector, and expanding opportunities for economic growth and access to quality jobs and career pathways, and aligning investments and not even necessarily in terms of who contributes money, but really focusing on how you can align the capacity of the workforce board to support a cohort of in an advanced manufacturing bridge program at the adult school that includes an opportunity to college and a clear strategy for transitioning the person into the course and to the next educational level within the educational pathway system that we're going to help map out for them. So this is just an example of a project that is was inspired by the work that we've been doing around this education to workforce dashboard, not so much using the dashboard, but really them saying, like, hey, there's something we think we could do by using these data ability to kind of package these together. And while we're not managing the consortium process, we're managing this particular kind of mapping element and then kind of standing up the foundation of some kind of regional sector partnership. And so now we have kind of a general discussion section. We have 5 minutes, so people should feel free to into the chat or just open up your microphones and share. What do you need to know, or what kind of help do you need to build regional pathway, meet the adult learners' needs to kind of really progress in their careers? Are there, would other kinds of data really help you with that? And then, what would you need to help identify collaborators or partners really for the pathways in your area? And we'd love to hear both challenges you're facing, I think, or success stories or things that you're doing to really address some of these questions.
Maybe thinking about it a little bit differently, let's take the one that we were talking about earlier, collaborators, partners, stakeholders for your career pathway. Ryan mentioned some of those that they work within their consortia. Are there people that are using other kind of collaborators or partners in their career pathway design or in delivering career pathways? No, right. She likes the idea that teachers have access to the information. Yes, I think it's great that it is very irrelevant. And I think the other piece that you can look at in the dashboard that Ali was talking about were gaps that might be missing, talking about developing career pathways or gaps that might be missing between the educational offerings and what the actual the LMI is telling you. Veronica is posting some links in the chat as far as the survey and our other upcoming webinars, and then building community through the journey of learning is another one that she's got in there. And then Ivan had asked a question about what is the sense of the labor market changing. He says he recognizes it wasn't on topic, and what examples and where demand is increasing or decreasing. And I don't think we have time to answer that, but if anybody wants to post the response. All right, okay, I just got the 1 minute signal. Maybe we could move forward to the next slide, Alexander.
Blair?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I wanted to throw the idea out about keeping an eye on state initiatives. Let's say like in the government's budget after the May revise. I mean, there seems to be millions of dollars coming at higher partnerships, and then there's mention of supporting a workforce that is focused on helping older adults or geriatric population. There's drawing that inference between like clean air vehicles and clean air technology, you know, and that goal to have like zero emission vehicles by 2035, and then we're kind of slowly moving towards that, you know, really kind of looking at the initiatives that are coming out of, that are just identified in the government's budget, you know, as far as initiatives for the state that we can plan. I saw plan pathways, so that we can begin to plan pathways around those initiatives, you know, kind of moving forward. And even if that's just in some communication, it's just like items to watch, but just things that we can get in front of the bus with our programming and kind of catch up with it. And I kind of remember that happening with logistics, you know, which is kind of, I remember when it was taking off, and then, you know, the economy kind of went down a little bit, but here we are, you know, logistics is just front and center.
Yep.
So,
And we got to be in there and informed. So I think that's an excellent point. I know we're basically out of time. I did want to point to Mary Ann responded to Ivan's question about workforce boards releasing their local plans. And so she says, once again, check with your local workforce board to find out when the plan will be released, because they're using updated LMI. I just wanted to say thanks, and please reach out to any of us. You have our names and our email there. And if anybody else on the team wants to say anything before we end out.
Just to Mary Ann's point, I wanted to say that, you know, your 3-year planning process is coming up for the Adult Ed Consortia. And if the workforce boards are releasing their plans, this is a really prime time to actually have that shared pathway conversation, because they will have sector priorities and industry priorities that may align with your own, and really identifying points of leverage where you can collaborate around a project would be really great to find out.
You're absolutely right, Randy. I write the local workforce development plan for the Verdugo Workforce Board, and I write the 3-year plan for our Glendale Learns adult education. So I absolutely make sure that they are both integrated and aligned, and I use from both. And I made sure that our local plan had all of our goals from our last 3-year plan in that plan. So, but you're absolutely right. For others who are not, yes, absolutely. Check with your workforce board, because you can steal all of that data and information for your own local plan, your own 3-year plan.
We've had workforce boards and AJCC job centers actually provide wraparound support for entire cohorts of students in these sort of entry-level training programs, and then work with us, collaborate to help identify employers to support work-based learning. So we would bring in employers for for mock interviews with sort of training participants, and oftentimes people would get hired out of that process. So there are points of leverage where that actually help the workforce board mission and the adult school or college fulfill that actually amplify the benefits for learners you're trying to serve. So I would really thinking about.
Yes, Randy, we do that as well. Now we incorporate work-based learning in all of our career pathways, especially because our career pathways are specifically designed for the most underserved populations. So you almost need that. It's almost an essential to have that. So we integrate both the adult education, the technical skills, and the work-based learning. And most importantly, the supportive services that has been so critical during this pandemic time. So because the workforce boards, they're allowed to provide supportive services for purchasing technology, purchasing hotspots, Wi-Fi's that they get to keep because they may go into a job where they're going to need those and be working from home as well. And housing assistance, car payments, insurance, all of that help them stay in their adult education program, in their technical training, and then go on to work-based learning. And yeah, that's another area. And the work-based learning is paid internships, paid externships using WIOA and non-WIOA dollars. So that almost completes your career pathway when you look at it that way.
Great. Veronica, are there any wrap-up things that you have to do with us before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Randy. And thank you all very much for participating in today's webinar. I have posted in the chat a link to the evaluation for today's webinar. Please be sure to complete the evaluation and let the WestEd team know what you thought about today's webinar. I see a lot of positive feedback in the chat. So if you can just transfer that information over to the evaluation, I'm sure they will greatly appreciate it. I have also posted the link of our registration page. All of the upcoming WestEd Spring Professional Development opportunities are open and available for registration. So if you haven't already done so, please be sure to register for those upcoming between now and I believe close to the end of May. There are quite a few offerings there. And then I also posted a link our other partner, the Foundation for California Community Colleges. They are starting some work with the CAP office around building communities of practice, and they have a kind of kickoff webinar that will be hosted on March 30th. And so I posted the link of where you can register for that particular webinar. And yeah, I see a lot of people saying thank you and all of those great things. I don't have anything else. We will be back tomorrow at noon with the CAP Effective Practices webinar around student transitions. And that's with the High Road Alliance team based on a research study they did for CAP. So if you haven't registered for that, definitely be sure to check it out. And thank you all very much for your time, your participation. We'll email you a link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation for your viewing pleasures and also sharing with colleagues. So thank you all very much and have a great afternoon. Bye, everyone.